I steadied the binder against my hip, its weight digging into my arm as I stepped into Marcus Hale's office. His corner space was all glass and steel, polished to the point of sterility, a stage set for someone who hadn't earned a single tool inside it. I'd spent 15 years perfecting Orion Freight's supply chains, designing algorithms that shaved hours off routes and cut millions from costs. All I asked for now was 12% more on my paycheck, 12% for a decade and a half of nights, weekends, and sacrifices. I laid the binder on his desk, every page highlighted, every chart clean. Marcus, I'm requesting a 12% raise. This is the work I've done, and these are the results. He leaned back in his leather chair, a slow grin spreading across his face before it cracked into a full-throated laugh. Head thrown back, shoulders shaking, he laughed as if I had told the best joke of his week. The sound carried past the glass walls. You're replaceable. Elena, he said between chuckles. If you think you're worth more, try elsewhere. Heat crawled up my neck as I picked up the binder and turned for the door. Through the glass, I caught sight of Christy at the front desk. She pretended to shuffle papers, but her cheeks were flushed. She'd heard every word, and so had everyone else. I forced my steps steady back to my cubicle. Though my hands shook, I set the binder down with a thud, and just then my inbox pinged. Company newsletter Orion Lands East Grove deal. Thanks to CEO's vision. I opened it. Page after page lauded Marcus's innovations, every efficiency, every milestone, all mine. My jaw locked until it ached. I shut the newsletter, but not before the headline seared itself into my mind. And then I remembered what I'd glimpsed on his screen when I walked out a draft contract with a so-called consultant. The name stood out, nephew of a board member. My stomach clenched. He wasn't just mocking me. He was already preparing my replacement. I closed my laptop slowly, the room buzzing faintly with fluorescent light, and felt something inside me harden. The tech wing used to hum with voices, keyboards clicking in a dozen cubicles, a kind of organized chaos I secretly thrived in. Now the silence was so complete I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above me. 20 engineers had once filled these desks. There were only 3 of us left, the rest replaced by the very systems I had created. Efficiency had been my mandate, and I had delivered. But staring at the binder on my desk, I wondered if I had engineered myself out of relevance. My screen blinked with a new email, another newsletter, another article plastered with Marcus Hale's grinning face. Revolutionary Vision in Supply Chain Efficiency. The headline read, Every statistic cited, every success story celebrated mine. Words I had drafted late at night had been lifted and recycled as if they had originated in his mind. I clicked it shut before bile could rise any higher. When I got home that evening, my modest townhouse felt colder than usual. I pulled leftovers from the fridge and ate at the kitchen counter, the silence broken only by the faint tick of the wall clock. My late husband, Daniel, had once told me during one of my marathon coding sessions, "Someday, they'll see what you've built." I pressed my fork against the plate, realizing now that nobody at Orion had ever truly seen it. Anger flared, steady and quiet. I carried that fire back into the office the next morning. At my desk, I unlocked the bottom drawer I'd kept closed for years. The key was always on my car ring. I never trusted anyone enough to leave it unguarded. Inside was the black notebook, edges frayed, corners dog-eared, its cover soft from years of handling. I opened it to pages lined with diagrams, handwritten algorithms, server logs, time-stamped experiments records of sleepless nights on my personal laptop, long before Orion ever touched the work. This wasn't company property. It was mine, my proof, my leverage, my lifeline. I slid the notebook into my bag, the weight of it strangely reassuring, as if I had finally remembered where my true foundation lay. That night, long after the house had gone still, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand, scrolling through saved voicemails I'd ignored for months. Most were clutter appointment reminders, spam, a message from my sister about Thanksgiving. Then one caught my eye, dated 6 months earlier. I pressed play. "Hi, Elena. It's Victor Torres, co-O at Titan Logistics. We met at the Vegas Expo. Still impressed by your demo. If you ever want to make a move, the offer stands." My chest tightened as I replayed it. I remembered him clearly sharp suit, yes, but it was his attention that lingered. He'd asked real questions, listened as if my work mattered. The opposite of Marcus Hale smirking across a desk. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the call button. Half of me expected the number to be disconnected or for an assistant to answer. But on the second ring, his voice came through, warm and unhurried. "Elena Vargas, I've been hoping you'd call. Are you free tonight?" 2 hours later, I was sliding into a booth at a quiet steakhouse downtown. The place smelled of oak and charred meat, the kind of establishment where conversations carried weight. Nothing like Orion's sterile cafeteria where Marcus liked to hold his vision sessions. Victor rose when I approached, shook my hand like we were old allies. We ordered quickly, and after the first sip of bourbon burned its way down, he leaned forward. "I'll be honest with you, Elena. We tried to reverse engineer your routing system. Couldn't do it. Your design is airtight." I kept my face still, though my pulse hammered in my throat. He went on. "We don't just want the system. We want you. Full leadership role. Build it your way. No interference." I swirled the bourbon in my glass, the ice clinking softly. Outwardly calm. Inside, I could feel my heart beating against my ribs like it was demanding an answer. The humiliation of Marcus's laughter still rang in my ears, and here, across from me, sat the chance to turn that laughter into silence. Victor didn't circle the subject. He leaned in, eyes steady, and spoke with the kind of conviction I hadn't heard in years. "Here's the package triple your current salary. Full benefits, stock options, and the authority to hire your own team. We don't want a cog, we want a leader." I set my glass down, the bourbon leaving a faint ring on the coaster. "On one condition," I said. My voice, even though my hands wanted to shake. "I bring what's mine clean. No interference. No committees burying me in the back office again." For a moment, he just studied me. Then his smile spread. Not smug, but certain. "Agreed. We'll have legal go through everything. You're not a figurehead. Elena, you're the builder." Something inside me shifted at those words. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be recognized, to be seen as more than a function tucked away behind glass walls. The air in the restaurant seemed easier to breathe. Later, as I drove beneath the Denver skyline, city lights flickering against the dark horizon, I replayed every word, yet guilt tugged at the edges. Christy at the front desk, who offered nervous half-smiles, Mara in operations, always doubting me but still relying on the systems I created, and the younger staff who remained after my algorithms had reduced the department to a skeleton crew they all deserved more than to be left in Marcus Hale's sinking ship. Walking away felt like saving myself at their expense. But then I remembered Marcus's laughter, the sting of it echoing in my chest, and I tightened my grip on the wheel. I couldn't keep bleeding for a place that thrived on my silence. The next morning, I opened a blank document, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I let the words pour out, deliberate and final. My resignation. When I was done, I read it once, twice, then hit print, sliding the crisp page into an envelope. I pressed the seal until it held firm. It sat on my desk, light as paper yet heavy as a verdict, waiting for me to deliver it to Marcus Hale. I didn't bother knocking. Marcus Hale liked to pretend he was too busy for interruptions, but the sight of him hunched over his laptop, Bluetooth in one ear and a half-eaten muffin sweating on a napkin, told the truth. He was performing importance. Nothing more. I walked straight to his desk and dropped the envelope squarely in front of him. The sound wasn't loud, but it landed sharp, slicing through the staged hum of productivity. He didn't look up at first. "Give me a second," he muttered, still typing. When the silence stretched, he sighed and tore the envelope open. His eyes skimmed the first line, and I watched the color drain from his face. Titan Logistics. His smirk cracked, his voice suddenly uneven. "You're leaving." After all we've built, I met his stare without blinking. You mean what I built?" His lips parted, then closed again. He started throwing offers into the air, desperate and clumsy more money, a leadership title, even something he called a partner position. Each word felt emptier than the last. I kept my voice calm. "My new offer is triple what I make here. It comes with stock and my own team." Marcus leaned back, rattled, his fingers tightening on the armrest. "So it's about money." I shook my head slowly. "No, it's about value. You said I was replaceable. You were wrong." For the first time since he took that office, he had nothing clever to say. I turned, my heels steady against the polished floor, and walked toward the door. At the front desk, Christy glanced up as I passed. Instead of dropping her eyes like before, she gave me the faintest smile, small but steady, like someone silently applauding from the wings. I carried that smile with me as I stepped back into the corridor, the resignation letter already setting fire to Marcus Hale's carefully constructed illusion of control. The summons came less than 24 hours after Marcus read my resignation. A terse email from HR, subject line, "Exit meeting required." I walked into the windowless conference room expecting a formality, but the atmosphere told me otherwise. Carl Stanton, Orion's legal counsel, sat waiting. His tie was knotted too tight, his expression too rehearsed. Without a word of greeting, he slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "Standard exit package," he said. "Non-disclosure, return of property, arbitration agreement, and non-compete." I flipped the first few pages, then raised my eyes. Non-compete. That wasn't in my original contract. Carl's tone was flat. "It's policy now. Everyone signs." I leaned back, letting the silence stretch, then, carefully. I reached into my bag and placed the black notebook on the table between us. The worn cover looked out of place against the pristine legal stationery. I opened it to pages filled with sketches, server logs, and dated annotations, every piece of proof I'd guarded for years. "This was built on my time," I said evenly. "My machines, my home server, documented from the first line of code. If you want to test ownership in court, let's go." Carl hesitated, then flipped through the notebook, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. I watched the shift in his face, confusion, recognition, then something close to dread. He shut it gently, as though it might detonate. "Fine," he said finally, voice low. "Just the NDA, no non-compete." I slid the stack back, pulled out a pen, and signed only what was clean. No hesitation, no second thoughts. When I pushed the papers toward him, it felt less like compliance and more like a victory. Rising from the chair, I slipped the notebook back into my bag. My steps out of that sterile room were lighter than any I had taken in years. The air in the hallway felt different, clearer, sharper, as though I'd finally cut ties with the weight that had kept me buried. The first morning at Titan felt like stepping into a different universe. The building was all glass and steel, but the energy inside was alive, not staged. Reception greeted me by name, my badge already waiting on the counter. When I reached the third floor, a frosted door bore my name, Elena Vargas, Director of Systems Innovation. Inside, 5 desks were arranged in a semicircle. The engineers looked up as I walked in, young, eager, eyes bright with curiosity. I set my bag down, rolled up my sleeves, and said the words I had been holding back for years. Let's get to work. The weeks blurred into long days and late nights, but the work was mine to lead. No one second-guessed every line of code or hijacked my reports. We built together. And for the first time, I felt like I was part of a team instead of a shield for someone else's ego. 6 weeks later, we flipped the switch. The launch rolled out clean, no downtime, no hiccups, no panic calls. Within 2 weeks, delivery speeds jumped by 30%. Fuel costs sank, warehouse bottlenecks nearly disappeared. My inbox flooded with metrics that confirmed what I had always known: my system worked. One afternoon, Victor walked into my office with a folder under his arm. He laid it on my desk, the numbers sharp in black and red. Titan versus Orion, side by side. The difference was staggering. Ready to take East Grove from them, he asked, his tone calm but charged. I didn't need to answer. The data spoke for me. Within days, Titan secured a 5-year exclusive contract with East Grove manufacturing Orion's most prized account, the very deal Marcus had paraded as his crowning achievement. The announcement hit the industry wires like a detonation. I watched the headlines stack up. Titan's name replacing Orion's in the same circles where I had once been invisible, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Marcus Hale felt the ground shake beneath him. My phone started buzzing the morning after Titan's deal with East Grove hit the industry wires. Marcus Hale. I let it ring. By noon, there were 3 missed calls. By evening, 6. I silenced the notifications, but the vibrations seemed to crawl under my skin. 2 nights later, I left Titan late, the parking garage nearly empty, the sound of my heels echoing against the concrete. A figure stepped out from the shadows near my truck. Marcus. His blazer was wrinkled, his tie loosened, the practiced polish gone. Talk to me, Elena, he said, voice raw in a way I'd never heard. Hundreds of jobs are at risk. You can't just walk away like this. I stopped a few feet from him, the air biting cold as I breathed in. For a moment, I almost saw the man he wanted me to believe he was the leader carrying weight on his shoulders. But then I remembered the laughter, the humiliation, the way he'd called me replaceable. I didn't take anything from you, Marcus, I said, my words steady. You just never valued what you had. He opened his mouth, searching for something to counter, but nothing came. His shoulders sagged, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. Streaks of gray glinted at his temples under the flickering garage light. I walked past him without another word. His footsteps didn't follow. Over the next months, the headlines wrote themselves. Orion's stock slid, then plummeted down nearly 60% before the quarter closed. Layoffs hit operations, admin, warehousing. Texts from old colleagues trickled in, some angry, some stunned, most terrified. When the announcement finally came, it wasn't triumphant. No carefully crafted LinkedIn post, no staged handshake photo, just a quiet press release. Marcus Hale had resigned as CEO of Orion Freight Systems. I read it once, then closed the tab. The silence that followed wasn't victory. It was something heavier, something that felt like the ground shifting beneath us all. The envelope landed on my desk at Titan with a heavy thud. Court summons Orion Freight Systems versus Elena Vargas. The charge: theft of proprietary intellectual property. I read the words twice, though I already knew what they meant. Marcus wasn't finished. The hearing took place downtown in a cramped chamber with peeling paint and fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Orion sent a young attorney who looked barely out of law school. He tripped over basic terminology, mispronounced logistics systems, and waved at documents he clearly didn't understand. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I simply laid my black notebook on the table, slid forward a USB drive, and stacked printed logs and email threads on top. Dates, timestamps, personal server paths, all proof the systems had been born in my kitchen at 2 a.m, months before Orion ever touched them. The judge barely looked past the first pages. No grounds for ownership. Case dismissed. Her gavel fell like the punctuation on a story already over. I walked out calm. But the anger didn't leave me. It simmered in the pit of my stomach, sharper than relief. A week later, I received an email from Carl Stanton, Orion's legal counsel. He asked for a private meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in a quiet coffee shop, the kind with cracked mugs and espresso that tasted burned. Carl looked smaller than I remembered, his beige windbreaker wrinkled, his hands restless around the cup. Back in 2018, he began. Eyes down. You emailed me. Said you were developing new algorithms. Asked if Orion wanted to acquire them formally. I took it to Marcus. I leaned in, and Carl's jaw worked. He told me, just use it. We'll handle it later. He knew. Elena. He knew all of it. I sat back, bile rising, and the lawsuit Carl swallowed. He sued you knowing it wouldn't stick. It was optics. He needed to make you look small. I stared at him, the truth settling like a stone. Marcus's downfall hadn't been negligence. It had been theft deliberate, calculated theft. The headlines about Orion's collapse didn't leave me untouched. Every article about plummeting stock prices and layoffs carried names I knew people who had stayed. People who had trusted the wrong man. My phone buzzed at night with messages, some angry, blaming me, most afraid, asking if I knew where they could land. I opened a blank spreadsheet on my laptop and began filling in names. Dispatchers, warehouse managers, coders, supervisors. I added skills, years of experience, notes about strengths. By the end of the week, there were over 200 rows. I brought it to Victor. We bring them in, I said, sliding the screen toward him. Not all at once, piece by piece. It's not charity. It's redemption. Victor studied the list for a long time, then nodded. Do it. We called it Operation Second Wind. Titan rolled out targeted hiring and retraining programs. Soft landings for those who had been discarded. Within 3 months, we absorbed more than 150 former Orion employees. 2 new branches opened just to handle the influx of work they helped generate. The numbers were strong, but the culture was stronger. Titan was no longer just a logistics firm. It was a place where people who had been dismissed found their worth again. Months later, I stood on stage at an industry gala, a glass plaque heavy in my hands, National Innovator Award. The applause blurred into a hum as I leaned into the microphone. Innovation isn't just software, it's how you treat people. It's how you value the ones building the future under your roof. Afterward, at the edge of the crowd, I saw him Marcus Hale. His suit was wrinkled, his posture diminished. He didn't approach. He just gave a small nod. I returned it. Nothing more. Back at Titan, I started a mentorship program, quiet, one-on-one, teaching young engineers to protect their work, to read contracts, to walk away when respect vanished. Above my desk hung a framed article, Orion's Fall, A Case of Talent Lost. Taped to the corner was a note in Marcus's handwriting. You were never back office. I never replied. I didn't need to.